Welcome to the Jamesburg Presbyterian Church. Today is Tuesday, September the 8th, 2020. Today I'm beginning a 4-week study of the book of Ruth. Ruth is an Old Testament book that it comes right after the book of Judges. It's an interesting story. It doesn't have a lot of historical facts within the book, but it does, and it almost appears in many ways as a parable, but it does follow a very sad story, and that is the book of Judges. If you read the book of Judges, it pretty much goes, things were going good for the people of Israel, and then they started becoming complacent. They sinned, did bad things, things started getting bad. What would happen is a person would rise up against them, or a nation would rise up against them, or a tribe would rise up against them. They would cry out to the Lord for help. God would send to them a deliverer. The deliverer would be successful, the things would be getting good again, the people would become complacent, and it just became a cycle. But the interesting thing about the book of Judges is that every time things became bad for the people, they became worse than the time before. And it was also kind of clear that the people never really recovered completely in each of the disasters. The final story of the book of Judges, and I'm not going to go into it today, is so disturbing at every single level. So hopefully you'll want to read it to find out what this disturbing story is, but it's beyond imagination. It's so disturbing that when we almost need the book of Ruth to appear as a kind of relief, a happily ever after story, a commercial to break up the problems that we see in Judges, and then after Ruth we go into the whole struggle about Israel having a king. And we see that the difficulties of the people with King Saul, and then later on the whole story of King David. So Ruth appears as a kind of break from all of this political, religious tension. The book of Ruth is also a story about us. Whether we like it or not, we can find ourselves in that book. And the question becomes, are we the people we want to be? Are we the people we say we are? Or are we something different? And what we find out in the book of Ruth is that the people say they're one thing, they're the people of God, they do the right thing, and yet they are not doing the right thing. We also find a storyline about people that we don't like. Here in the book of Ruth, we're going to meet people from the tribe of Moab. The tribe of Moab had attacked the people of Israel when they had migrated into the promised land. The Moabites were hated. As a matter of fact, the Old Testament says that a Moabite person cannot enter into the house of God down to the 10th generation. So it's a story about a group of people that people despised. A very interesting thing. And the question it raises for you and me is, what people do we have strong prejudices against? Because as it turns out, the Moabite in the story is the one who does the right thing. It's also a story about contrasts and irony. The place that is supposedly full of plenty becomes the place that is experiencing a drought and experiencing no harvest. And the place of death apparently becomes the place of life or life-giving. So we're going to see a number of those kinds of things. The story takes place, we are introduced to 4 characters in the beginning. And this is in chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. We're introduced to a man by the name of Elimelech and his wife Naomi. And they have 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Both of these names, Mahlon and Chilon are ironic names in that they do not imply long life. They're living in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is Hebrew for the house of bread. The problem is they've encountered a drought, and for a period of time, they're living in Bethlehem. There's a famine and there's no food, and so Elimelech makes the decision to move his family to a place where there is plenty, the land of Moab. The irony is, of course, that the Jewish people don't like the Moabite people. That's the worst thing you can be. So they move down there, and as their boys get older, the boys meet nice girls that they want to marry. They marry, and both Mahlon and Chilon now are happily married and all living together. About 10 years into their time in Moab, Elimelech dies, and so do the boys. And now we have 3 women living together, doing the best they can, and Naomi hears that the drought that had caused them to move to Moab is no longer a problem in Bethlehem. And she determines that since they own property in Bethlehem, and since her family is in Bethlehem, that she would return to her home. So she calls together her 2 daughter-in-laws and says to them, if you stay with me, you really do not have a chance at a good and happy life. I'm not going to have more children, so you can't get husbands from me. It would be better for both of you to go back to your parents' homes, and maybe in your parents' homes, when you're living there, you'll find an opportunity to be married again. You'll find what you're looking for. You'll find a happy life. So go home. One of the daughters-in-laws, her name is Orpah. And Orpah at first says, no, I don't want to go back. I want to stay with you. I will go with you. I will go to Bethlehem, and that's where I'll be. Naomi insists, you've got to go back to your family. So Orpah agrees, and she returns home. The same conversation happens with Ruth. Ruth is a Moabite woman, and Naomi urges Ruth to go back home. Naomi says to her, return home, my daughter. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughter. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me. One of the things that we find in Naomi's theology is that she believes that these bad times have come upon her because God brought them upon her. It's kind of the theology that many of us have. When we get into those tough times in life, we think that God has brought those tough times to us. Maybe they've been brought to us because we're supposed to learn a lesson, or so goes our theology. The question is, does God bring bad things to us, or does God bring good things to us? Does God bring bad things to us and then leave us abandoned, as Naomi believes? Or when we're in those tough times, does God provide us strength and solutions and surround us with people who care for us? That's the question we need to ask ourselves, and it's the theology I prefer. God is not the source of my bad times, but the source of my strength as I face those tough times. So Naomi urges her daughters to go back, and Orpah says that she will. Ruth hasn't said anything just yet. But Naomi has acknowledged that both daughters have been kind to her. And the Hebrew word that she uses is hesed. Hesed is a very loaded word. It's a very rich in its meaning. But basically it means undeserved kindness. In what Naomi is saying to Orpah and Ruth is, you have gone beyond the call of duty. You have gone beyond what I should be able to expect of you in terms of your staying with me, in terms of your supporting me. You have done this kindness, and because you have done this, I am sure that God will show hesed to you. So there's a sense in which Naomi also believes in retributive justice. Again, the question is, do we believe that same thing? Do we believe that when we're good, we get good always, and when we're bad, we get bad always? Or is it possible that we can come into some tough times in our lives undeservedly? I believe that that's the case. But the book does raise those kinds of questions in regard to our theology. The business about having husbands and having sons has to do with Levirate marriage. And basically what the Jewish people believed at one time is if a woman's husband died, then the family needs to provide that woman with another husband who can provide children. And these children are the kind of social security plan for the parents. They take care of the parents as they get older. This sort of practice was true among the Hittites, the Assyrians, and in many Ugaritic societies, in addition to the Hebrew people. So Naomi says, even if I had a baby today, would you wait for that baby to get old enough so that you could take that baby's hand in marriage? And of course the answer is no, can't do that. Naomi concludes this portion of this chapter by saying that she has become bitter. Now, interestingly, Naomi's name means kind of happiness. And now she's using the Hebrew word Mara, which means bitter. So she has gone from sweet and happy to bitter and angry. And we're going to see that Naomi stays this way for some time into the story. Naomi kisses Orpah. Orpah kisses Naomi. They say goodbye, and then she leaves. And we never hear of Orpah again in the book of Ruth. However, Ruth is not persuaded. She clings to her mother-in-law. Ruth says to her mother-in-law, "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me." We sometimes read this passage during wedding ceremonies as the words between a bride and a groom. But in reality, these are the words of a daughter-in-law to her mother-in-law. There are some things that we could say about this. In one place where she says, "Your people will be my people," actually in the Hebrew sentence, there is no verb. So it more literally reads, "Your people, my people. Your God, my God." In other words, the Hebrew makes it clear that it's not going to be a future thing. When we get to Bethlehem, I will adopt these people as my people. It's a done deal. What Ruth is saying is, your God is already my God. Your people are already my people. In my heart, I know these things to be true. Now, the Moabites worshipped a number of different gods. One of the Moabite deities was Chemosh, which was the god of chaos, it's also possible that they worshipped Baal Peor. This comes from the book of Numbers in chapter 25. So when when we get into the land of Israel, when we get to Bethlehem, and what Ruth is essentially doing is abandoning her religion in favor of her mother-in-law's religion. So she's changing her primary allegiance and once again showing Hesed. At this point in time, the text makes it clear that Naomi says no more. There's no more argument. Now, it's not entirely clear whether she stopped talking to Ruth altogether or just stopped the debate, the argument. But it is clear that Naomi has given up trying to get Ruth to go back home. Now, Ruth is not legally bound to do anything for her mother-in-law at this point in time. And what Naomi has chosen to do, travel from Moab to Bethlehem, is a very dangerous journey for a woman by herself. It's also dangerous for two women, a young woman by the name of Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi. But it clearly, Ruth is not going to abandon Naomi on this journey back to Bethlehem. Now, what we would expect, or what we should expect, if we were reading this in its first reading long ago, we would expect that the people in Bethlehem would return to Naomi the land that her family owned. We're going to find out that becomes an issue in the book of Ruth. But they should be returned to their house, they should be returned to their land, and because these things would have been held on to for them by their family. So the question becomes, one of the questions we're going to be asking is, who is the real family for Naomi? Is it this Moabite woman who refuses to abandon her mother-in-law, or is it her family that she left when she went from Bethlehem to Moab? Who's the real family? And it leads us to ask ourselves, who are we in relationship to our family? Are we really family to our family members? Are we really loyal like Ruth is to Naomi? We find out that the whole town comes out. They don't really recognize Naomi, and that makes sense. About 10 years has passed. 10 years, a person can change in their physical appearance. And some aging has gone on. Maybe her hair is a little grayer now. But she says, Naomi says, don't call me Naomi anymore, because Naomi is the word for pleasant or sweet. Call me Mara, which is the feminine Hebrew version of the word for bitter. And she says, I am bitter because God has done these things to me. In this first chapter, there are a number of contrasts. The word sub is used, the Hebrew word sub, which means turn around. Naomi and her husband and two sons turned around from Bethlehem and went to Moab. When things got better in Bethlehem, Naomi and her daughter-in-laws were prepared to turn around and go back to Bethlehem. When Naomi was urging her daughter-in-laws to leave her and go back home, she used the word sub to mean turn around, turn around. In just 85 verses, the word sub is used 23 times. Very interesting notation, because the word turn around also means to turn not only away from something, but turn to something. And from that concept, we get the word repent. Repent means to turn away from something and turn to God. This word is an important word in the book of Ruth, turning from something, turning to something. Obviously, Ruth has made the decision to stay with Naomi, So she is turning to Bethlehem. In this homecoming scene, we again see a contrast. A couple contrasts. The first is the reaction of her own kin, her own family living in Bethlehem, compared to the way in which Ruth is treating Naomi. One has become loyal, going no matter what with Naomi. The other, the family members who have stayed in Bethlehem, aren't cozying up to Naomi. Naomi introduces Ruth as the Moabite or the Moabitess, and the people and the designation is done in such a way that there's really not a need to do that designation. She's being introduced as not just my daughter-in-law. This is my daughter-in-law Ruth, the Moabite woman. It's to remind us that Ruth is the outsider. Life sometimes can become bitter for you and me. Life sometimes can become a struggle for you and me, and sometimes we make decisions that don't always work out in the long run, just as they didn't work out for Ruth, for Naomi and her family. Sometimes we also have to sub, that is, turn around, turn from something, turn to something. Hopefully when we're turning away from something, we're turning to God. God is the one who gives us the strength to get through the tough times. I would encourage you all to read the first chapter of Ruth. Next week we're going to take up the second chapter of the book of Ruth. And remember, this is a book named for a Moabite woman, for a foreigner, for a person who was not acceptable in Jewish society, where the book is named for that person. And the question we're going to be dealing with next week is, who is Naomi's family? And who is the real foreigner in this story? Thank you very much for viewing today. Thank you very much for those of you who are sitting here. And later on in time, this video will be on YouTube. Tomorrow I'll be doing a devotional in here. It'll be at noon. I hope all of you will tune in. I have a great idea planned, or at least I think it's great. At least I'm entertained by it. And that's, for me, that's important. Thank you all very much. Goodbye.